And I call on Senior Planner Ann Siegenthaler.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. I have just a short update for you, and I will go ahead and share my slideshow with you. Just one second here. So the purpose of this item is to just give the council an update. There's no decision required on your part. We just have started the 2024 comp plan review with the Planning Commission. And in March, the Planning Commission approved the docket or list of items to be considered, and they also approved what we call the public participation plan for the comprehensive plan. So I just wanted to give you all an update on those two items. So first, I'll give you a list of what's in the docket that we'll be reviewing, and then I'll stop, see if you have any questions, and then I'll talk a little bit about the public participation plan. Excuse me, there is an echo. Okay. So briefly, a reminder for all of us, what is our comprehensive plan? It's really our roadmap. It lays out our vision for the future, how we live, work, get around, and grow over the long term. And it contains our main policies about transportation, housing, land use, i.e. zoning, and the environment and how we treat our natural resources. The State Growth Management Act is really the overarching state body of terms, updating the policies, and we'll be looking at updates to policies that are required by the state and also by the county. So just a quick word on the timeline. We started the cycle in January. We did not receive any private proposals. Sometimes you might recall we'll get a proposed rezone. We didn't get any private proposals. So this is really staff driving the updates and the tech edits to the different chapters, working with a consultant who's watching for the state mandates and the county mandates to make sure we hit those targets. The Planning Commission decided on the docket and public participation plan. They've just started in April reviewing the initial policies and regulations, and eventually later this year, early next year, they'll have a public hearing on all this, and then it will move to the City Council, and you'll begin your review in the same manner. So I want to just review with you quickly what the different chapters or elements are in the comprehensive plan and some of the new things that we're required to address. And then the new items, the things that are mandated by the state or county, are shown in red. So we first have, there's a vision statement and a values statement, and those are kind of aspirational statements about who and what the community wants to be. There's a chapter on plan monitoring and amendment that just is fairly rote, just tells us when and how we're supposed to update the plan. There's a chapter on governance and permitting, and that's kind of about how we ensure that that our government as an entity is efficient and fair and accountable and responsive. We also are required to better address tribal participation in our permitting processes. That's a requirement. And Sumner does a pretty good job of that already, but we have to make sure that we're hitting that state target. And there's a chapter on community character, and that's where we have our policies about good design, how to protect and support the historic downtown, how we create walkable neighborhoods, and so on. There's an element on family and human services, and that's all about well-being and well-being for the range of people in our community, seniors and youth and families. And it talks a lot about our partnerships with other agencies who provide family and human services. And we also have an economic development chapter, and that talks about how we promote new businesses, how we sustain our current businesses, and what our employment targets are. In the land use chapter, that's where we have all the designations in the which translates into zoning throughout the city. Some of the new things that we are required to do under our land use chapter is we have been assigned a certain number of housing targets and employment targets for the planning period, which goes out to 2044. And those have been assigned. It starts at the state and it goes to the county, and then the county, working with all the local jurisdictions, distributes and allocates those targets to the individual communities. We also need to have policies for healthy, quote unquote, healthy communities. And that's really about creating walkable communities, having trees, and trying to avoid food deserts and that kind of thing, to the extent we can do those things in Sumner. We're also required to have new policies that better address racially disparate impacts and potential displacement and exclusion of what we are calling underserved, traditionally underserved communities, marginalized communities. There are different terms that you can use, but the groups who have traditionally been not had equal access to resources and city services. We have essential public facilities, which lays out the process for figuring out how to site difficult large projects. We have historic and cultural resources that we'll be updating. There's also a chapter on environment and climate change. And what's new about this is actually the term climate change. It used to be just environment. But now we're required, again, by the state, the Vision 2050, which is the PSRC, multi-county vision, and by the countywide planning policies to try to address our impact on greenhouse gas reduction and emissions, energy efficiency, and climate resiliency. In our housing chapter, we've also got a number of new things that we need to address. We're going to be required to ensure that we have policies that address housing needs and the supply for all income levels. So we need to, instead of just saying we're going to try to provide housing for everyone, the bar has been raised, and we actually have to look at how do we provide housing for very low income, moderate income, for all these different income bands. We're also required again to address this issue of racially disparate impacts and inclusion. So our consultant will be helping us to look at some of these issues. In our transportation chapter, we'll need to, as usual, we must align our transportation facilities with our population and employment projections. We need to have enough roads to get people around, and using all modes of transportation. We're also going to be updating our level of service standards, looking at racially disparate impacts, and again, goals for healthy communities, which typically would involve complete streets and pleasant, pedestrian-friendly street cross sections. We're also going to be updating our traffic impact fees. We haven't done that for some time, and we're due for that. I don't have enough information about that, but we're pretty sure we're going to be needing to update those impact fees. We'll be updating our capital facilities plan, and updating levels of service in that. Updating our utilities plan and also our parks and open space plan. It's a separate document, but it's part of it's a chapter in the comprehensive plan. And then last, we have a shoreline master program that is adopted into the comprehensive plan, although it's a separate document in and of itself. So that's kind of a quick overview of the chapters. And then part of this entire update is going to be after we develop the policies, we're going to have to look at our development regulations and make sure that those are up to date. We need to update our critical areas ordinance, that's wetlands and streams, steep slopes. We're going to have to look at accommodating more housing that we're required to accommodate. So we'll have to look at lot development standards. We'll need to look at development standards related to energy efficiency to deal with that climate change policy directive. And again, we'll be looking at traffic impact fees. And then just the catch-all, looking at any development regulations that we need to update to comply with all of these new policies. And then part of this process is development of an environmental impact statement, and our consultants are developing that with us. So that's pretty much the scope of the comprehensive plan update. And then I can talk a little bit about the public participation plan with you.
Do we have any questions on the update before we move on to the next subject? Mr. Brown.
Determine how many housing units it must visit.
Yeah, that is, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna forget the number, but there are a couple thousand additional housing units that we need to accommodate. And it starts at the state who projects the population growth that the region can anticipate, well, the state and in particular our region, tells us the population growth that, and they've got all the science and based on census data and trends and so on. So they determine what kind of population growth the region's going to see over the next 40 years. And then that population is allocated to the counties around the state. And then the counties, in our case, Pierce County, works with all of the jurisdictions in Pierce County to decide of this population for the county, where is that going to go? And so there's a lot of negotiation that goes on, trying to figure out who has capacity so that each jurisdiction doesn't take the same amount of housing. So for example, Tacoma is going to take a lot more housing than Sumner, right? So we're actually assigned a number, it's a target, but we do have to do our best in our comprehensive plan update to meet that target. So it is pretty much top down, but I hope you can understand the logic of how that is determined.
Could I just add one more
Yeah.
thing that being a high capacity transit community, we are tasked with taking on more than the Ordings of the world that don't have high capacity transit line, even the Bonnie Lakes. So it is definitely top down, but then each of those cities is classified differently based on type of community that they are. It's not
Yes.
just a even, this amount per city per capita.
Yes. And may I also say, Mr. Brown, that because we're a high capacity transit city or designated that by the county, we have the town center, we have our transit station, and we have our town center plan area, which already has been zoned for pretty high density. So although we might be assigned the certain number of new housing units we need to accommodate, we might have enough capacity already. So through this comprehensive planning process, we have to do our homework, and show show the math that here's what you assigned us, and we've got it, here it is, here. A little bit of it may go there, town center, or maybe all of it, a little bit maybe over in East Sumner.
And that's based on the next voted
Yes.
thank you.
Councilmember Potato.
So when you're talking about transportation, are you talking about any internal, citywide transportation besides private cars? And, are you talking about any public transportation?
Yes, and indeed, that's kind of big on everyone's mind. In the policies, we haven't gotten to regulations yet, but in the policies that we're developing, we're already looking at the whole range of transportation. There's our street grid to accommodate vehicles, but we're also looking at transit options, and there's already some draft policies in the comprehensive plan that talk about exploring with Pierce Transit and the other transit providers options for efficient transit links to link neighborhoods to the transit center and neighborhoods to each other and commercial services. And part of the transportation set of policies is looking at sidewalks and bike lanes, because if we can get people out of their vehicles and it's easy for them to get on their bike and go to the transit station, we want to have the bike lanes and infrastructure to do that. So yes, it's all part of the same package, and we've got policies in there that we're already looking at.
And then with that bridge that's coming from Riverside, would that be considered part of the transportation plan or?
Yeah, that we'll have that in there. That will be, our trails plan is considered in the transportation package of policies. Our trails plan, the Sumner Link Trail, because it is part of our bike and pedestrian trail system, and there's actually a map of this that will be in the comprehensive plan.
Also, the next item on your agenda is our transportation improvement plan, and that includes a lot of these, they kind of work in tandem, right? Public Works is coming up with what they're going to focus on to improve our transportation. They're doing a transportation study that helps feed that, what's important. So as Ann mentioned, it's mass transit, it's vehicle traffic, it's multimodal transit,
Okay,
kind of everything in one.
okay,
Mhm.
good.
Yes.
All right, thank
Yes,
you.
and our city engineer is working closely with the planning staff like me on this transportation element to make sure we've got all of these plans and facilities accounted for.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you.
Councilmember Cole.
Thank you. So I just have a question about healthy community. What really does that mean? Is it some definition that the city came up with, or that maybe that comes from the state? Can you explain that?
Yes, I appreciate the question. I'll try to explain it. We don't have a very complete definition of that. It is a concept that comes from the countywide planning policies, which various cities in Pierce County have adopted. And we'll try to figure out how to get a good definition of that for council to look at and for the planning commission to review. The concept is that healthy communities are communities where people are encouraged to have lifestyles and services are encouraged that encourage people to get out and walk and make healthy choices. So a package of healthy community policies might include, again, looking at maybe zoning to see if we can accommodate services like food, grocery stores, and healthy foods close to everyone in the community. Healthy communities also involve the street grid and our sidewalks, and making sure our sidewalks are friendly, pedestrian friendly, that they're tree lined and feel safe, that they're well lighted so people can walk in the evenings or walk to say a transit stop. Because we're just now starting this process, I don't have a really good definition of healthy cities or how that's going to actually translate into our policies. But I hope that gives you a little better idea of what that means.
Yeah, that does help quite a bit. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, and good job on the presentation. Very easy to understand. I just had a question. For the housing types, does this include, I'm assuming it includes houses as well as apartments and ownership type, whether houses are purchased by the occupants or they're purchased by somebody who is going to rent them out. So can you help me understand, is this for all of the above or just focused on where houses are built and what type of apartments are built?
Sure. Yes, we are going to be looking at all housing types, and you hit on the range. We're looking at housing types that are single family and owner occupied, housing types that are attached single family, like a townhome, and are owner occupied. And as you can imagine, these are different forms of housing too. They take a different shape and site plan. So we're looking at all of those home ownership options. We're also going to be looking at the rental options, apartment. So that's a totally different type of a residential unit, is a stacked apartment situation. So we need to look at apartments. We need to look at what is called middle housing, which one example would be duplexes and triplexes. Those can be, oftentimes they're owner occupied. A family will buy, one unit there with a yard, or sometimes they are rented out. They offer a type of living situation that a lot of families appreciate. So we'll be looking at that type of housing as well. And as you can imagine, for each of these different housing types, there's a corresponding market and income level that makes these housing types within reach of different income levels in town. So that's another reason why we're looking at all of these different types, so that we can provide housing products that a range of people with a range of incomes can find in Sumner.
Okay, thank you. And I had one tag-on question. During your review of, let's see what I wrote down here, policies and then leading to regulations, does the city have any authority and or is there any thought to imposing rental regulations as far as the when rent can be increased? We're getting a lot of feedback from the public that it's very expensive to live in Sumner because the landlords are just jacking up the prices of the rent.
So far, rent control as an issue has not come up in. We don't have policies currently that address that. Of course, as you know, that is a huge policy question for the council. But when we do get to the development regulations stage, and if we need to pull out another tool to help us figure out how do we provide these different housing types in Sumner, and how do we help people stay in their community and age in place and so on, that may be something that our consultants might want to pull out and present to you as an option. We know how controversial it is, but if that seems like a tool we should put out on the table for you to consider, that could be one of the things we bring back to you.
Okay, thank you. I'd be very interested in that because it's a very important part of keeping people in Sumner. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Councilmember Newman.
Thank you. So the planning commission has gone through apparently and has already made recommendations that these are the things we consider for the docket, but not any with any specific, I can't even talk. Not with any specific considerations yet. They're gonna go through it. When they go through it, because some of these are new and because I mean, some of them are more complex than others. Are we going to get them in doses from the planning commission? Like to be able to consider, are we waiting until the planning commission is done with all of the recommendations before it comes to council? Or are we going to be able to process these in segments?
Sure. This is the plan now, and if there are strong objections, we can rethink this, but just in terms of staff resources, efficiency and continuity, the plan right now is to have the planning commission, and this is typically how these documents are developed. They go through the planning commission holds a hearing, they finish. Then they move to the city council. The city council has their study sessions, they hold a hearing, and then we finish. So it is a lot of text. There will be a huge volume of material for you to review, you're right. So the way we're taking it through the planning commission is the way I hope to bring it through the council review, and that is to take it in sections. So right now, the planning commission just finished up the first few chapters. And although there's a lot of text there weren't really a lot of substantive changes. And so then at their next meeting, we'll take the next few chapters for them to review. And then at their next meeting, we'll have them give us recommendations on that set. And then we'll start again with another section, another few sections. And so what I'd like to do is to bring those to the council kind of in the same way, package these, some of the simpler chapters that maybe aren't as controversial, package those, give those to you first on the chapters. So for example, housing and transportation are going to be really complex, and that's going to require a lot of discussion. So we might just bring those two to you for a meeting. And staff will need to gauge that as we see what the development regulations or the code changes are going to be as well. And it might take us one meeting to just get through the transportation plan. Does that help give you a better idea of how?
That makes me
Yeah.
feel better. I didn't want the whole
Yes.
chunk at once. So as long as there's enough time for us to actually both look at them into like segmented and then, but also cohesively, that's great. I have questions on outreach as well. First of all, with tribes, I assume maybe, does that mean both Muckleshoot and Puyallup?
Yes.
Like, okay, both of them. Thank you. And then the so the outreach about the underserved populations. I am looking to see, not sure, are we specifically addressing, like, so we list them, but I'm not seeing which ways we've identified. Oh, I guess it's through translations, whatever, like the plan to address them.
Sure, I wonder if that's the next section. I was gonna go over the public participation fund.
Oh,
It
wait.
talks a little more
Okay.
about and so don't let me forget. Ask me again if you would, please. when
Okay,
we get to
thanks.
that.
Mayor, if we could just, is there any more questions regarding the comp plan before we get to the public outreach?
Any more questions?
Before Ann moves on to that, I just want to tell council that we've been closely monitoring some housing bills that are working their way through the legislative process. And while this council has made tremendous steps at ensuring additional housing units coming to Sumner, what the legislature is proposing is more top-down decision-making from Olympia, basically taking away local control. And Ryan has been monitoring it very closely, provided testimony at least one hearing and a lot of written feedback. And it's very clear to us and to AWC that there will be a housing bill passed by the legislature that will likely take away a lot of local control over our zoning and our land use within a half mile of the transit station. So more to come on that, but I just wanted to let you know that, this is kind of a separate, but very closely related to the comp plan, because it matters how we even write the comp plan. Are we subject now to these rules? Do we need to put them in the comp plan? It all still working its way through Olympia, but a lot more top down coming from Olympia. So go ahead, Ann.
Okay. So the public participation plan, this is something we do on all of our comprehensive plan updates, is we try to engage the public in what we're doing, let them know where they can find our updates as we go through the process. So the outreach that we're doing on this 2024 update entails what we typically do for our outreach, typical city outreach for any of our projects. We have Sumner Connects webpage. We put articles in the city e-news, which goes out every week. We work with our communications director to put out social media posts. And we also have the quarterly newsletter that's mailed out to residents. And that's a nice direct way for people to get information, goes right to their door. We also have, as you know, we have our spring open house and our fall open house. So we'll have information at these two open houses. We have one coming up on April 25th. So we'll have some information on the comprehensive plan updated that time. And then, as you know, when we go through the council and planning commission public hearing processes, there's always public hearing notices required for those. Now, and this is what Councilmember Newman, I think, was getting at. As part of this, we want to reach out to, we'll just say our underserved groups, for lack of a perfect term. And our underserved groups, this is pretty typical of communities. Our underserved groups typically include youth, older adults, people with lower incomes, people who have different abilities, our Hispanic community, the Black, BIPOC community, our tribal communities, and other non-English speakers. So we worked with our communications department and our consultant to identify, have we got the list right? Are we pretty much capturing who we might consider underserved groups? And then the next step is to figure out what special strategies can we take on to try to connect with these underserved groups. So this is what we're doing. We have developed a flyer that is just a brief overview of the comprehensive plan, tells them what it is, tells people that they can see what's being proposed, they can weigh in and provide us comments, and here's the website that they can go to for more detailed information. And so that flyer is going to be sent to, sorry about my mouse here, sent to the schools and the library, the food bank, the senior center, local churches, the YMCA, and our special transit providers. We have Beyond the Borders, I think is the name of it. And we have some other special services in Sumner that we'll reach out to, but that's generally the idea there, generally the list. And we also have ongoing outreach that we conduct that just as a matter of our daily city lives and staying connected to our community, picks up some of these underserved groups. And those strategies include our language line, which maybe you have seen on some of the flyers and the newsletter. In this case, we use the Spanish language to write the language line that says, if you need help understanding this, you can call and we'll get some translation services for you. And we have on our web pages, we have translation capabilities. So if somebody goes to the comprehensive plan Sumner Connect site, they can click on the translate and get that in different languages. Our website's available 24/7, so that's really useful for people who can't attend meetings but want to stay informed of what's going on. Our e-news and social media, not only are those easily translated, but youth tend to rely on that kind of form of communication. So it's a good way to keep youth informed. And again, our quarterly newsletter goes straight to people's doorsteps. They don't have to do anything. It reaches all income levels. And then again, we have our open houses in person, or they're also online. So if somebody, they work a late shift, they can't attend any open houses, they can see that information online at any time. So that's pretty much the public participation plan. And this is just a quick outline of where we go from here. City council review is going to start beginning in probably first quarter of 2024. So any questions on the public participation plan?
Councilmember Newman.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple. So, first of all, what do we mean by sent? Like, so that they will be sent, the flyer will be sent to key agencies that serve these groups, like the churches, the schools, what do we mean by sent?
Sent might be, we haven't actually determined that yet. It's going to depend on who the agency is. In some cases, the food bank, for example, the plan there is to deliver some of those. There's a community summit coming up. Plan there is to just have some of the flyers. We've already talked to the school district, and that might be just, simply delivering. But sent is probably a little bit of a misleading term. Sent or delivered, distributed to.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, I had some concerns because I thought when we did our road closures and whatnot, we didn't make small businesses print them out themselves. We gave them to distribute. And so I was kind of hoping for that, especially for food bank and local churches.
Yes.
And probably
Yeah.
the why, like rather than asking them or expecting them to deliver for us, that those will be dropped off. And then my other concern is that especially with some of the church services where we know there's largely like Spanish speaking populations and whatnot, rather than give them, like, are we going to have some of this already translated in Spanish rather than rely? So if English is not my first language, I'm just skipping. I'm not even going to look to see that there's a phone number that I can call for, so like, even if we do a postcard in Spanish and ask, the food bank for their top 3 other languages, because I know they have people who visit there, I think speaking Russian, Korean, whatnot. If there's just a couple of postcards, at least in that language, that announce that number that's available, or just have a few of some of the copies just already translated for them, especially with the larger Spanish speaking population.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that. And you're right, there are, Spanish is not the only language, there's the Ukrainian, Russian community, and we have some South Asian and Asian languages as well. We can look at that. I have to say that a lot of people who have those other languages as their first language doesn't mean they don't speak English. So we'll look at that. We want to be mindful of how we target that and what the languages are that we use. And so, for example, one of the issues I could think of is if we had a postcard that's written in Ukrainian or some other Slavic language and drop it at the food bank, that might not be where that community, those speakers go.
Right.
So it's a challenge to figure out how to do that match.
Yeah.
But we'll look at that.
Understood, but where we know some people, like the food bank, can identify which ones are, like, which languages do their other clients use other than English. And we know some services are specifically in Spanish, and that's for a reason. So I understand that we won't target mail, but I'm talking about when we know people are. I'm very appreciative that we do have the translation line. and those services. But putting it at the end of an English, like English only document, I think is gonna
Yeah.
make it underused, but.
And the school district also has a pretty good sense of what the language distribution is.
And Councilmember Newman, to your point, this is something that we've actually had quite a bit of conversation about lately at the staff level of what's the best way to make sure that we have appropriate translation services available for more documents and different, what's the best strategy to use? And it's probably going to require a budget amendment in the near future because as you can imagine, translation services are not inexpensive, and using Google Translate isn't a very
Accurate.
accurate or appropriate way to always do your translation services. So definitely a need that's growing in our community.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Councilmember Potato.
Well, I'd like to, thank you for your presentation, but I'd also like to thank the communications department for the easy information that they're giving out. Like today I got the city newsletter and it was nice. You just, how many crimes were there, traffic stops. It has very, succinct little snippets of information that are helpful and understandable. And you're not reading a big document to find out that, oh, well, there is, what's going on in the city. So I think that if you use something similar in your communication, work with Carmen and her staff, that I think you can get good information out to people.
Did anybody else? Nobody? Oh, we have Councilmember Cole.
Yes, sort of one maybe quick question, but I didn't see the slides. Maybe I missed it about the Planning Commission's role and the staff role. And for the Planning Commission, it said that it must not, or any item in the comprehensive plan must not be similar to a request denied in the previous cycle. What is the reasoning behind that?
Oh, I see. I'd like to give you some context for that. We're past that point where that criterion that you just mentioned is considered. That's actually a requirement in our code. When we first go out, as we did in January of 2023, when we first go out and advertise that we're going to open up the comprehensive plan to amendments in 2023, 2024, people who want to submit a comprehensive plan amendment have to meet these certain criteria. And one of those criteria is you can't request a change that is substantially really similar to what was submitted in the previous cycle. So for example, if somebody in 2020 applied for a rezone of a big, huge parcel off of Valley Avenue, and that, let's say that was denied, they can't come back in the next cycle and ask for the very same thing that we already reviewed and looked at and was denied.
Okay.
So given that we didn't have any private proposals, we're now past that point, and now it's pretty much just the Planning Commission and the City Council looking at what policies make sense to update and what regulations make sense to update. Does that help?
That does help. And it brings up one other question, where the staff and the staff's role, it talked about Burke Consulting being used as a consultant in the last update. So I was just curious as to whether or not you use different consultants every time there's an update, so that you make sure sort of like that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed.
Yes. I'm not sure if your question is related to making sure we're diverse in who we get to help us through these updates, or if we get someone who's really experienced.
And I think it's really for me about the experience.
Okay, okay. Yeah, we actually go out with an RFP, request for qualifications, request for proposal in this case. And our consultants out there in the world are very busy because everybody's updating their comprehensive plan. So we didn't have a lot of consultants responding, saying they're interested in working on this comprehensive plan update. But Burke, who's very familiar with Sumner, who's done a lot of work for Sumner and actually did a comprehensive plan update with us previously. They submitted a proposal. It was a great proposal and they were selected. And we have a lot of confidence in them because, as I say, they've worked with Sumner on a number of these plan updates. They worked on our parks and open space plan in 2018. So they've done a range of things for the city of Sumner. And Ms. Cole, they also, Burke is the prime consultant, but they also put together a team of other consultants who have expertise in special areas. So for example, our transportation plan is going to be developed primarily by a consultant called the Transpo Group, and they've done a lot of work with Sumner and our engineering staff on our different transportation plans, our traffic impact, and so on. And then they have a specialist who's going to work on our critical areas, wetlands and stream regulations, for example. So it's a really good team that has experience working on other plans at the city of Sumner.
Okay, that was helpful. And then just lastly, I want to just sort of echo what Councilmember Newman said about translations. I think that that's really important. I know that I volunteer with a food bank, and there were individuals who came on a regular basis where English was not their primary language. And so I think it really is important to maybe have, as she mentioned, maybe even just postcards or something like that in their language. Just even if it just says, hey, this is what this is the comprehensive plan, describe what it is and where you can go get more information. So thank you. Otherwise, I thought your presentation was really clear. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. Oh, Jason.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for all your hard work on that, Ann.
Thanks, Will.
Very good.
You're in for a lot of hard work yourself.
I know. I also commend the council. They've come a long way too. I'm making forward thinking and I'm really proud of them. So, okay, now I'm going to call on City Engineer Michael Kosa to give us resolution number 1657, 2024, 2029, 6-year transportation improvement program annual update.
Good evening, everyone.
Welcome, Michael.
I'm excited to be here and I'm sure you all are too.
Oh, yes.
I can't wait to talk about the transportation program that we have for the next 6 years.
As long as
you'll
it
update
doesn't
next
take
year.
6 years to tell us.
I'll do my best. We will. But we'll get all your questions answered though. That's the goal. Let me share my screen. Wonderful. So great segue to have a great discussion about the comprehensive plan, which is that 20 to 40 year document that we're preparing. 6-year transportation plan. Well, so Ann talked about our transportation plan as part of the comp plan. That's a separate, similarly long range planning document of the 20 to 40 year type document. This is our 6-year transportation plan. We get to update it every year. And it really just encapsulates the next, half dozen years. Helps us describe the projects that we would like to see move forward. And that's really important, especially when we go out and ask for grants from outside agencies to fund some of these. They look at, they say, is it on your transportation improvement program? And we say yes, because that's what we've done. We advocate for projects that are on this program, and it makes it very simple for them to say, oh, your council is fully vested in this plan.
You
So
would think if it was a 6-year plan, we'd be good for 6 years.
you would think so, but the state requires us to update it annually.
Okay,
Otherwise, we wouldn't.
thank you, Michael.
No problem. So I'm going to go through our each one of the items that you see in front of you, and I'm going to kind of zoom in, zoom out as we go. The first set of items is our arterial projects, so larger arterial streets. And they are prioritized generally in the order that we see as important. However, all of our projects are important to the development of our community. So we'll start with A1, which is up here, up at Stewart Road. Stewart Road Bridge is our #1 project. We're replacing the 2-lane bridge with a new bridge that will have 4 vehicle lanes, a sidewalk, and a trail crossing. So we are looking to bid that project later this year and award it in early 24, probably about 3 years to complete. So from 24 to 26, 27, that project will be under construction. We have all the funding we need for the project. We're just finishing up permitting right now and some right-of-way acquisitions. But once all of that is in place, we will be able to move forward on that. So very exciting. You're welcome to jump in at any time if you have questions, and we'll get them answered. But I'm just going to go through each of our arterials first. So A2 is our second arterial project. It's our 166 widening project. We're going to be widening that area and adding 2 roundabouts to the intersection. The north on-off ramps, and then the 64th intersection will turn into a second roundabout. So that project is in design, early design, working through environmental permitting. We're expecting environmental permitting to take 3 or so years at this point. So it is a little further out than other projects, but has to do with our fish passage that runs right underneath that intersection. So we do have our environmental documents in, they're being reviewed, and but we're looking forward to seeing that move forward. Our next project is A3, which is our Main and Wood project. That project, as you all know, is moving forward and is currently under construction. They're just starting the first gas main relocation on that. We have a contractor on board, but that project will be leading into 2024, possibly, depending on when the signal poles get here. They have a very long lead time. But that's all fully funded and ready to go. A4 is our next project, which is here at Traffic and Maple. It's our Maple Street pedestrian signal. We'll be replacing the rectangular rapid flashing beacon with a full signal where that turns red when there's a pedestrian that activates it. That's grant funded by federal funds. Additionally, we are going to be replacing the signal backplates on all of our signals, the little part that runs around the outside of them. That's all part of one project, and we will be going out to bid later this year, probably in the summertime. And that will be finishing up in 2024 as well, with more signal poles that take a long time to arrive. A5. Over here, we have 160th between Main Street and 64th. We're continuing to look at widening sidewalks along that minor arterial. And that's been partially done by developers, might be done by more developers as more of those properties redevelop. We did finish the sidewalk on the east side of the road between Main and the YMCA earlier, well, late last year. So that part is complete. A6 is Valley Avenue. We're looking at doing an overlay of Valley Avenue between 410 all the way up to Main Street. We have funding to go all the way to Mead Macumber, right about there. from the freeway to Mead Macomber. 2025 is when we received federal funding for that design, and then 2026 is when we would be completing construction of that overlay. So that is A6. A7 is up here. Back to the big map. The entire Stewart Road corridor, because we're looking at doing intelligent transportation system improvements, ITS, essentially connecting the signals together so that they work in a coordinated fashion, along with coordinating with the railroad crossing there. So we do have funding for design of that through federal sources. So we'll continue to seek construction funding, but that design funding will begin in 2025. Next, we have A8, which I just kind of put in this box over here, but includes West Valley, East Valley, 142nd, and Sumner Taps Highway. This is our systemic horizontal curve and roadway departure safety improvements project. Essentially, we're going to look at curves on those roadways, determine if we can make structural changes, whether it's signage, whether it's striping, rumble strips, also some shouldering potentially, guardrail, to see if we can improve those so that we don't have folks running off the road in those areas where we've had some run off the road crashes in the past. A9 is the intersection of Puyallup and Tacoma Avenue. Looking at putting a signal there, as well as an overlay of Tacoma Avenue in the portion that wasn't overlaid previously. So we do not have funds for this project yet, but we do have a potential funding source, some federal funds that we're looking at potentially being able to do design phase funding. So that is an exciting upcoming project. Might be a little ways out, but it's still a needed intersection upgrade. A10, pop back to the main screen, is this arrow over here, which is our Gateway project. That's WashDOT's Gateway program, where they are completing the whole hookup of SR 167 with I-5, kind of their mega project. We, as a city, have committed $500,000 to that project. About right now is when we were planning to provide that to them. There's still talk in the legislature of whether there's going to be any delays on that project, but we're monitoring that. And if they're moving forward as they originally planned, we'll be probably providing our $500,000 commitment to them. So the thing gets started on one of the phases of their project. A11 is another southbound, or a southbound hot lane for 167. It's another WashDOT project. They did the northbound HOV lane. They have plans to do the southbound HOV lane in the next, they're designing it in this upcoming biennium, and then planning to construct it in the following biennium. Those things change, but it's a good target to think that in the next couple bienniums, next 4 years or so, there might be some good positive movement on getting another lane on southbound 167.
Go ahead.
It looks like it's A10, not A11,
Oh,
or do
A11.
we have a different, A11's over on Sumner Taps?
Oh, yeah, I apologize. We did add, we hadn't had this A8 project in when we did the packet, and
Oh,
we
okay.
realized we needed to add it. So once I got to 8, the numbering got off. So I apologize. But yes, the one I've got on the screen has been updated since then. Should have mentioned that before. But yeah, A10 on the screen is the Gateway project. A11 is the southbound hot lane. The A12 is over here. We have a future upgrade of Sumner Taps Highway and 60th. That intersection has some roadway geometrics issues. If you know where we're familiar with it, it's pretty obvious. But we have the potential, or we have that as a potential target out there for future funding, a potential need as that East Sumner neighborhood continues to grow. Was actually a project that replaced, if you remember, the 62nd east-west corridor. This was kind of the, well, if you take that away, we need to have some other traffic improvement for that area to get folks to flow where they need to go. Next project up is A13. Another WashDOT project looking at installing roundabouts at 410 and 162. That is on their time frame. Heard they have some funding. I can't remember if they're entirely funded, but we look forward to working with them to get those that area better than it is now. A14 is a project that they also have identified at WashDOT, potentially to add a southbound lane there between 162 and down to our city limits. That is less firm. I think that's more of a conceptual idea, but we've included it anyway. And A15 is Main Street and 160th intersection improvements right here. At some point, when this area develops to the point where we need to do something other than a always stop sign there, we wanted to identify that as a potential upcoming need. So the 15 arterial projects on our program. Any questions before I move on to collectors?
Any questions? Nope, seeing none.
Wonderful. Move on to our collector streets next. Just zoom in once, because we can see them all together. So collector streets, we have C1 up here is our, we have our Elm Street sidewalk improvements. We actually got funding from the Transportation Improvement Board, TIB, so it's state funds, to add a missing portion of sidewalk between Siebenthaler Park and the sidewalk that's the kind of trail section that's already up there. A little bit more on Elm Street. So you can kind of see where it ends. We're going to pick it up from there and get it the rest of the way, as well as put a improved crosswalk up at the intersection there. C2, we've talked about the Woonerf project quite a bit. That's represented with the shape here, but also we have a phase 2 of that project, particularly for water line improvements. So it's all utility work as opposed to the Woonerf that we have that we've been focused on for the past year or so. The water line improvements just finishes a couple of the other water lines that had not been in the phase 1 project. We're looking at construction of that in 24 to 25. And we do have utility funding for that work. It comes out of primarily out of the water fund. There's also probably a sewer component for some sewer line replacements for some old sewers in there. Next we there we go. C3 is 160th from Elm to Main Street. We've had a number of a couple developments go in there to add some of those missing sidewalks, but we are looking to continue to develop that now to a collector standard. So that's identified here. Funding is not been identified for most of these collector routes, but it is something that we target and try to figure out ways, or also to see if we can how many of these developments that occur along can complete their frontage is very important to the build out of these roads. C4 is Elm Street, so kind of just around the corner, same idea there. Down to C5, there's a small portion where we have a missing sidewalk gap along Parker Road, and so we've identified that and looking at figuring out how to fill that. Odds are we'll be adding that to our grant application list. C6 is Parker further to the north. We do still have a number of missing sidewalks along Parker Road, and as those properties redevelop, those would be good opportunities for developers to help with their street frontages as part of their permitting process. C7 is the Zender Railroad crossing. That was identified in a plan to, we could do some improvements there for how that crossing operates. There at one point was some state money potentially for that. That seems to have not materialized, but we continue to look for state money for these rail crossing, at-grade improvements that may come from a state funding source. C8 is a couple these roadways over here that are related to the East Sumner Neighborhood Plan that came from that. So a new 2-lane section here, a new 2-lane section here on 164th in the 162nd segment extension. And we also have, another, our last kind of item for the collector system are 2 sidewalks along Mead McCumber and Gary Street. There's a couple sidewalk gaps along those. We've applied for these in the past, haven't been successful in getting those funded yet. But definitely on our radar of missing sidewalks that I think would benefit the schools nearby. That's all I have for collector streets. With that, I'm going to go through our trail program briefly. We'll start here. So our trail program, we have Friar Avenue Trail as our current #1 target for getting completed. We have federal funds for design and right-of-way, and we are so close to getting some construction funding for that project. And so if that comes through, you'll hear about it. But also we'll be looking at potentially construction in 24 or 25 at this point. So we could be starting if the funding comes through. There is a funding package at the state level that would fund that, all those improvements for construction completely. So that has been exciting. We've been tracking that, and we'll see if it makes it through. It's not below a cut line or anything. It's in a very good spot on the list. So hopefully that will be funded, and then we'll be able to move forward very quickly on that one. We are getting ready to start purchasing properties on that Friar Avenue Trail as well. Property, just the small strip takes, not large portions of properties. T2 is our other, is part of our White River Restoration Project. We have a trail relocation that we're going to need to do up there. And so that's what we have shown. There's some, you can kind of see where the existing Sumner Link Trail runs through that way. If you're not familiar already, we're looking at relocating that. It will be kind of up against the railroad, the new 10 tracks railroad tracks when that goes in. Back down to T3 is our River Grove pedestrian bridge project. For that one, we actually just got, we're likely going to be getting some design funds to finish up the design for that project. And then we'll be looking to, we'll be seeking construction funds next. But that one's been one that we've been putting out to a number of different grant application processes. I haven't hit the right one yet, but it will be much better for us to say we have a fully shovel-ready project, and that should help with our funding applications. Because right now we're kind of about a 30 to 50% design. We'd like to finish that up and be at 100% design so we can move forward there. And say we're shovel ready. T4 is, and T5 are kind of conceptual ideas of a couple different potential bridges over the Puyallup River. Especially T5 would be, well, T4 would be a benefit because we could connect to the Puyallup Trail. That's just on the other side of the river. T5 would be able to connect the River Grove area down and eventually to the Foothills Trail through the Knutson property potentially. So those are two pretty interesting projects that more on there for conceptual ideas, but still would be beneficial to have something similar that show up. So that's all of our map items. I have just a short list of other kind of annual program items, but any questions or concerns?
Any questions? Go ahead, Charlotte.
First of all, you said that, I think the public hearing is April 7th, like, so a week from today. And then when is council going to be asked to vote on this?
It would be, public hearing.
Thing?
It would be the following meeting. I think it would be May
So
1st.
2 weeks, roughly 2 weeks later.
Correct. Yep. So there'll be a public hearing next week.
Before we are asked to do that, and this is probably Ryan's department, can we please get a map looking at these side by side of where in the last few years we have also increased all of our density limits? Like Sumner isn't used to having additions of new apartment buildings going up. And I'd like to see where, and I know that there are like some members of our community have fear or a frustration about when those go up, if we've actually planned for their in and out of, vehicle usage and sometimes parking too, but that's a separate issue. But I'm just wondering if our road improvement plan like matches up with our density increases plan. And then my bigger question is, so why do we do this before we do comp plan changes?
You want to take it?
Sure. I was gonna say, this is part of an annual update, so we will do it before, during, and after our comp plan changes and continue to do so for the next 20 years or next 10 years until we do our next comp plan. So I think it's something that we have to continue to just keep up. It really does drive the grants. It has benefit for that grant purpose, especially.
Okay.
They look to make sure that you've got programming.
Michael, can you maybe just speak to the differences between the TIP and the transportation plan?
Yeah.
Which is a separate,
Absolutely.
completely separate document as part of the comp plan.
So the transportation plan, which this is technically the transportation improvement program. But the transportation plan was last updated in 2015, just in concert with the last comp plan update. We are actively doing the next comp plan update and the next transportation plan that covers a wide variety. This is much more project focused. That's much more planning level focused, long range planning, very similar to what Ann was talking about earlier.
Right.
And so there is that long range planning document that's coming, and it's in concert with all the rest of the work we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Oh,
Really would line up better with your question.
yep,
Yep.
makes sense.
We're
Thank
looking
you.
at housing, we're looking at density. We're building a new transportation model for how, looking at how all the vehicles will be moving. So sorry, I get excited.
All right, thank you.
gonna be
Councilmember
great.
Stewart.
Thank you. Michael, nice job. I'm just kind of curious. I probably should know the answer to this, but how do these projects get on the tip? Or why don't some others are, and what do you do to look and I know you're changing a pedestrian signal and we're putting in a new signal on Wood and Main. As I drive around town during rush hour, I see a couple of different places that could really use a signal. So how does the public get word to you that and ask you to consider putting a signal somewhere?
That's a great question, Councilmember Stewart. There are sometimes it's well, first of all, how do people reach out? They are welcome to always reach out directly to the Public Works Department and voice their concerns and voice it to whomever it is at the city. That information gets filtered back to us at some point, and because we want to make sure that people are heard and feel like they have their questions answered. So that's something we do on a daily basis. If there are certain areas that people have concerns about, we take that information in, we look at it, at least at face value at first, analyze if this is an issue that something needs to be done. And if the longer or the further we get down that road, we start looking, we see there's a need, we'll go further and we'll continue to go farther down that road until we're doing a traffic study. Signals specifically have very specific warrants that the manual on uniform traffic control devices, it spells out exactly how one justifies whether a signal is warranted or not. And that's how we choose whether or not there's a need for a signal. An example would be the signal at Tacoma and Puyallup we've been talking about. That analysis, that intersection was looked at. We ended up going through a planning effort to do a study for that intersection specifically. And then it was determined that it does meet warrants for a signal. So once that happened, then we said, all right, we should really be looking at putting this on the radar as one of the projects we're looking at completing. We do these types of analyses on usually it kind of becomes apparent that we should be looking at that. We've looked at, for example, at 160th and Main Street, when we took that from a two-way stop to an all-way stop, we did an internal study, determined that that was an appropriate treatment at the time. We know eventually it will get to the point where we may need a signal there or some other intersection treatment, and we might look at that again and study it. So, we take in those kind of comments. We look at the system ourselves because that's part of what staff is doing on a regular basis, looking at operations, looking at how things are backing up in terms of congestion, and then reacting to those. So it's a little bit of an art, but it's also it's rooted in what people tell us on a daily basis, and we really try to take those comments to heart and run them to the ground to make sure that if there's something that we should be doing, we want to address that and then get back to people and let them know what we found.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Councilmember Potato?
I think you're gonna talk a little bit about safe roads to school. And our neighbor is very concerned about the intersection at Cherry and Thompson, which needs a crosswalk. And she was told like a year ago or more that, yes, they'll be putting the markings down, but she says, well, here it is another 6 months. And I believe part of the thing is weather. You have to have the right weather. And then, if you're doing other projects that would use the same equipment. So do you have any input?
Yes. That specific crosswalk you're discussing, excuse me, we have a thermoplastic contractor who's already on board. We signed them up last September, October timeframe, and we just missed the weather. That sort of material is best applied in 50-degree and higher temperature ranges,
Okay.
especially when it's 50 and a little going up.
Yeah.
We haven't had that weather since October. I've been watching very carefully to try to figure out when to get somebody out there, but that rain doesn't work well with that work as well. So it's been a challenge to try to get them out there, but as soon as the weather turns, we'll be out there, and that is one of the crosswalks that will be added.
Okay, well, good. I'll let her know because
No problem.
thank you.
Anybody else? Okay,
Last couple things here. I'm just going to go through our annual street maintenance program. I think you've heard some of this already, and we'll continue to talk about the different elements of the program, as well as we do have the open house coming up in a few weeks. This is one of the items that we will have on some boards and talking to the public about what we do for our annual maintenance program. But just quickly going through, we have a street overlay program that council decided to fund last time, the budget during the last budget cycle. So $150,000 a year is there. We are looking at coming up with a internal study on how best to apply those funds during this biennium. We have a paint line application, which is every year we paint the roads in the city using Pierce County forces. R3, we have pavement repairs, which we basically patchwork. We have our patching contractor coming in the next few weeks to do a lot of the kind of spot surface and subgrade failures throughout the city. Potholes really, but the big potholes that are really beyond the scope of a normal average pothole size. Roadway plastic marking application, the thermoplastic project we talked about is part of that program at about $56,000 a year. We have a chip seal project that will be coming in later this summer. It's about $136,000 annual funding. We have annual funding for our crack seal application program at $78,000 a year. You'll be seeing crack sealing going on in the near future. We'll be putting that out to bid in the next couple of weeks. We have our neighborhood traffic control program. That's our traffic calming program, about $28,000 to look at modifying residential streets to enhance pedestrian safety, minimize cut through traffic on some of the local roadways. We have an ADA transition program for kind of those emergent ADA issues that come up, about $40,000 a year if there's something that needs to be addressed in a very immediate fashion. And then our sidewalk maintenance program, that's our street tree sidewalk repair program. We're funding at a $250,000 level. We'll be really working on, we're planning this year, and then 2024 will be a significant capital improvement project to get a lot of those sidewalks fixed, the ones that are damaged by street trees. We did talk about safe routes to school. That is typically a grant program. We apply every time the cycle comes out. We have had very little success at getting safe routes to school funds, but we continue to apply, and we are going to continue to find out what we can do to improve our chances there, because we do feel like there's some significant improvements that could be done around our schools. Finally, just talking about the projects that we are completing in 2023. A couple big ones here. We participated in the City of Pacific's Stewart Road project, just west of the bridge. We provided $700,000 for their project, which was match of a grant that we've received almost on their behalf, but that project completed basically at the beginning of this year. So that was one major project that's been recently completed. The Alder Kincaid utility improvements, or the WUNERF project, will be completed later this year. So we're excited about that. And then also the Academy Street bike lanes, which is paired with the WUNERF project. So those are the major projects we're completing in 23. And that is the end of what I have prepared.
Anybody have any last questions? Councilmember Bocchetto.
So any idea when all the work will be done on, like, the roads being closed, not on Main, but out on this side of town?
It's
And the roads repaved, I guess.
there's an amazing amount of work that's going on in the city, and will continue to go on in the city for a couple more years, it feels like. But specifically the project right around, this general area, probably looking at the June, more like the July timeframe. Late July is when I'd be seeing most of that work done. There might be some bleed in, just a bleed over, depending on weather, depending on availability of some key parts on our water service. The contractor's been having a difficult time getting certain pieces of the water system that whether it's the fittings really.
Yeah.
Certain fittings are in short supply and very long lead time. So majority of the work though should be done in the next few months. And then we'll be looking for any last straggling work that needs to be done after that.
And then when I drive down Meeker from Park to Main Street, as you're going, there's kind of a big dip. And it doesn't, instead of it being sort of a flat surface, there seems to be dips all along the way. Is there any reason for that, or is there faults under there? Or
It's
what
a
it is?
speed bump. They put in it upside down.
We can look at it a little bit and see if there's something that see what we can. We'll take a look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, I don't see any more. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
That's a lot of roads. We're keeping track. So now I'm going to call Andrea Marquez, City Attorney, for Library Capital Facility Areas Do's and Don'ts. Uh-oh, here she comes. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Good evening. The title of this presentation is scarier than the substance, so. There's not a lot of ways to trip up, but if you do, it's a huge penalty. So we wanted to have this conversation because now that the city council has passed its resolution and established the boundary for the LCFA, we're now into essentially election season on this particular item. So we're going to walk through what you can and cannot do between now and the vote. So recapping the process, Sumner City Council adopted its resolution establishing the boundary. The Pierce County Library District, on the heels of the city of Sumner, did the same. And tomorrow on the Pierce County Council's agenda, they will be adopting, or at least discussing for vote, a resolution to approve the establishment of the LCFA and get it on the next ballot. So state law governs this issue, and I realize I have a typo in my slide. It's RSW 4217A, not 2417A. But the point of that statute is that no elective official can use or authorize the use of a city facility directly or indirectly for the purposes of promoting or opposing a ballot proposition. So what is a city facility or a public office? This building is pretty obvious. You cannot use the council chambers to discuss the LCFA. You cannot use your city-issued laptop, your city-issued cell phone, your letterhead that says City of Sumner on it. It goes all the way down to inability to use a mailing machine for postage. No taxpayer-funded facility or item can be used to support or oppose this ballot proposition. The PDC established rules to implement that state law, and they are relatively flexible and take into account the facts of each issue. There are a number of divergent enforcement paths that can follow depending on what an elective official or a city employee even does. But essentially, the idea is that hard and fast rules are really hard to establish on things like this. So the PDC reviews every complaint they get on a case-by-case basis. What do we know though? There are some pretty black and white rules that you can follow. You can provide objective and fair presentations of the facts. The boundaries of the LCFA are X. The median increase on a single family residence to your property tax bill is X. And a lot of that information can be found in the presentation that Jason provided on the night that the resolution was adopted. So talking about the facts is absolutely fair and encouraged. What else can you do? Support ballot issues and engage in political activities on your own time. Do not introduce yourself as a council member, but introduce yourself by name. And make it very clear that you don't speak for the council, but that you speak for yourself on any particular issue, whether you're promoting it or opposing it. And make sure you're doing it off of city property and off city time. Remind people to vote. Ballots have been mailed. Make sure you get your ballot in on time, that kind of thing. I think this is fairly self-explanatory, but these reminders are important. So keep it to the facts and make sure it's not on city time and not with the use of a city facility or material. What can you not do? Promote or encourage a vote one way or the other. So an example of a PDC violation in the past on a ballot measure is a council member in a city that will not be named utilized council comment at the end of a regular meeting to encourage his constituents to approve a ballot measure. That is a very clear example of a violation. Again, you do not want to use city property, facilities, equipment, or supplies for campaign-related activities. You do not want to ask city staff to prepare materials or otherwise participate in the election by social media, print, etc. There is one exception to that rule. The PDC has established that it is routine and customary for a city to publish one publication with the facts, making sure people are aware of the issues that they'll be seeing on the ballot. And more often than not, you see that in an election pamphlet that comes out before the election. So that is fair game and encouraged by the PDC, and it's been determined to be routine and customary. So what happens if you violate the PDC? I said earlier that there's a number of different enforcement tracks. Most often, violations like this result in personal monetary penalties. Somewhere between, depending on the egregiousness, somewhere between $1,000 and $10,000. So I promised to keep it short. Clear, bright line rules, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
We have any questions? No. We get it.
Carmen, is there any questions from? Oh, okay.
No. Thank you, Andrea. I think we're good. All right. All right. City Administrator report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two things tonight. First off, just a reminder, the Community Summit is coming up on April 18th, 5 to 8 p.m. Right now, we don't have any council members registered. So if you're interested in attending that, please let us know so we can get you registered. And just reach out to Michelle, or you can let me know and I can pass that on to her. And then second, I just wanted to let you know that this morning we received notice from the state that a number of our businesses did receive funding under the statewide disaster relief grant fund. This is in conjunction with the fire on Main Street. Over $650,000 is going to about a dozen businesses located in our downtown. It's just, those are grant dollars too. They're not even low interest loans. So this is an incredible award for these businesses. And I just want to thank Ryan Windish, who really led the effort on making sure that we got all those applications in and worked closely with all those businesses.
All right.
That's all I have for tonight.
All right. Do we have any meeting agenda items? None, none. Committee meeting? None? No, okay, we are good. We have no executive session. So I will adjourn the meeting at 7:37.